The Copa America is just 92 days away, and our United States men have Avenger assembled near Arlington, Texas, to mount an assault to do something that nobody in history has ever done before. Win a third successive CONCACAF Nations League title? What? Is it even possible? Okay, so there is CONCACAF in the title, people, but the semi-final lies ahead of us. Thursday night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time on Paramount Plus, and the winner will proceed to play Sunday night's final against either Mexico or Panama. And it's good to have this young cast of characters back in our loving arms again. I know they need a better nickname than they currently have, and we'll fix that in this show too. But mostly, we'll discuss all you need to know about the clash against the Reggae Boys in this preview presented by Michelob Ultra. We'll dive into all there is to come because I'm not alone. It thrills me to be able to break this epic CONCACAF rumble down with a gent whose opinion I always learn from. El Rey of ESPN and host of the must-listen Vamos podcast on the Men in Blazers Media Network, where he's fresh off taping with Luca de la Torre and Jesus Ferreira, amongst others. It's incredible to see my friend, Mr. Herculez Gomez.
Raj, how are you? Always a pleasure to be on with you.
Oh, Herc, just about to go on Nations League duty. How are excitement levels, Herc, between 0 and 10? Have you got a nasty case of Nations League fever?
Yeah, I think I'm breaking out. It's one of those where it's not a good thing. I think I'm breaking out in hives here. Lots to talk about on both sides. You know, I think what affects or happens with the U.S. men's national team directly affects all of CONCACAF, and it's a domino effect, and how that affects Mexico and how affecting Mexico could affect domestically here, both leagues, Major League Soccer and Liga MX, is always an interesting thing, interesting dynamic, but very excited for it.
What Kirk just said is when a CONCACAF butterfly flaps its wings, ... But I want to start with a very quick toast. Raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day to something my friend John Green actually wrote this week after Liverpool lost to Manchester United. He's thinking and speaking a lot about fandom recently, and I love it. His emotional depth. He said the following, and let's remember this ahead of the Nations League semi-finals on Thursday. John wrote, "The good thing about football is that when you're disappointed, someone else is happy, and that someone else is probably a nice person who loves their family and whatnot." And then in a second tweet, John added, "But the bad thing about football is that it's impossible for me to think of that person with any empathy or vicarious joy. All I can think is that I want their food to turn to ashes in their mouth and for their descendants to be cursed down through the generations for the millennia." And let's just say, to both truths being held by us all at all times. And if that isn't the perfect way for us, Herc, to lean into this US-Jamaica clash to come, I don't know what is. What do you make of it?
That is some straight trash talker. That is school of Mikel Arteta, Champions League 101 right there. Sergio Conceição will have something to say about that. That's how you know you wanted to sting. Back to the descendants. Not even you or your mama. It's back to the descendants. So that one's going to sting.
Yeah, that's John Kuhn. It was just the FA Cup, baby. But we're talking about something far more important than the FA Cup. We're talking about the CONCACAF Nations League, people. This is big. I mean, simple question up top. Is this the best squad the United States has ever had, individual for individual, depth of talent-wise?
I'm glad you broke it down that way. Individual per individual. And yes, I think there's no question about that, Roger. You look down on paper, and these players are playing at some of the biggest leagues in the world, some of the biggest clubs in the world. They've had experiences in Champions League. They've won Champions League. They're on pace to break records for the U.S. men's national team. I don't think that without a shadow of a doubt, regardless of how young this team is, and they are very young, and they probably would be younger if Tim Ream wasn't skewing that average up there.
Amazing.
But it's a reality. This is, without a doubt, the most talented squad the U.S. men's national team's ever had, or pool on paper. Now, there are other teams in the past that have done more with less, and that's a reality. Big signature wins. The 2002 U.S. men's national team that beat Portugal in their group play, stunned a Portuguese team that many thought were contenders in a World Cup, and then beat their bitter rivals on the biggest stages of the world to get to that quarterfinal game against Germany. And
Mexico.
Greg Berhalter himself, had a header pulled off the line by Torsten Frings that hit his hand. You were a missed handball away from going to a semifinal appearance for the U.S. men's national team against Germany. And then you can go beyond that. 2010, Bob Bradley's team, my generation, snapped a 35-game unbeaten streak for Spain, in that Confederation Cup. And that Spanish team won 2 Euros, 2008, 2012, and a 2010 World Cup. And then go on further, Jurgen Klinsmann's team, that was my generation as well, beat Mexico in the Azteca, beat Italy in Europe, beat the Dutch in Europe, got out of the group of death, beat Ghana finally in a World Cup, etc., etc. There were some signature wins, Germany as well. And now we come to Greg Berhalter's team, which is by far the best collection of individual talent this country has ever seen. But you're still waiting for that to kind of come together on the field.
What Herc's saying is football's not played on grass, it's played on paper, or something like that. I wish it was played on paper, because on paper, we can dream.
You could still dream. Still dream, but it's. I mean, I was listening to you read off, I was listening to you actually sound off their accomplishments, how young they are, Raj, and where they're at, the Champions League, and all these different things. And I'm sitting here going like, wow, like when on earth did we ever expect the U.S. men's national team to be a collection of individuals
exactly.
like this?
And we should never take it for granted. But I do need to pick you up before we get people writing. When you said they've won Champions League, by they, we mean he. And we know he was subbed on, but he then wore a US soccer sweatshirt with the post-game. So that counts for double. And we are going to break down the squad, the decisions, the options, the realities. But big picture before we do. The goal, obviously, is to win this thing. But it's really an amuse-bouche, football-wise, a speed bump on the road to our real 2024 destination, which is the Copa America this summer. Just a big, a moment of truth, really, for all of it. But this Nations League, I don't know how you'd file it, Herc. It's a chance to keep improving, to keep building chemistry, to keep developing. They've got Colombia and Brazil before the Copa, but this is it pretty much until then. And we should say this team is not used to playing big teams or even playing before big crowds right now together. That's going to change as we head towards the summer. What is your big picture goal for this team?
Yeah, I'm glad you put that in perspective. And it's not to any fault of their own that they can't schedule these big tournaments. The integration of the Nations League in Europe and all these competitions that FIFA has now just thrown into an already congested schedule makes it impossible for the U.S. men's national team to book these friendlies that were maybe much easier back then. Listen, I don't think the U.S. needs to win this tournament. What do you get out of winning the Nations League again? Nothing. Mexico needs to win this tournament. Mexico needs this badly. The U.S. men's national team, Greg Berhalter, they need to avoid catastrophe. They need to avoid an utter meltdown right before Copa America that would be a snowball effect heading into Copa America. You want to win because that's the American mentality. You need to win because that's in your DNA now for this U.S. men's national team. But I don't think it's a must-win for them. Greg Berhalter isn't going anywhere. Greg Berhalter just needs to manage his team the best way possible heading into Copa America, which is the goal. I'm not saying you don't take Nations League seriously. You play marbles, you want to win. You play Nations League, you want to win. But must-need win? That's for other teams in this confederation.
By the way, I love this nuanced team talk that you can picture Greg Berhalter saying, like, the goal is not to win, boys, it's to avoid catastrophe, okay? Guys, can we all agree we're going to avoid catastrophe? Box tick. We're talking about Greg Berhalter, because this, for me, is the second big picture goal. What does Greg Berhalter have to prove in these next two games that he can manage a squad this talented and able individually? This squad, with as many tactical options in terms of its depth, that he can manage the personality and almost begin to show us a more nuanced tactical idea of football than we did in the first cycle that he wants them to reflect.
Great question. And my initial train of thought there would be he has nothing to prove to fans or pundits and everything to prove to his own team. People forget
Agree
that
with this.
while Greg Berhalter is still green, he's coming off a World Cup. He's coming off a cycle with the U.S. men's national team, and where he's groomed these players to feel like there is a culture. And in that building of a culture, he lost some players. And maybe when you lose a Gio Reyna because of what happened, you can lose another player. Maybe they lose a Zach Steffen, or anybody in that locker room who all of a sudden thinks that trust was betrayed with how things got out there. You still have to win over your players and let them know that you're capable of, again, putting out a good tactical lineup like you did against England. But again, learning from a bad tactical lineup like you did against the Netherlands. I think that's what he has to prove, and not to us, to his team, that as they are ever evolving, he is ever evolving, and he can get it right the second time as well.
This is so right to me, Herc. You know, the players often say how much they love him. Every time a player does an interview, they're like, "We love Greg."
Yeah.
Like there's like the media, like, "Look, he loves Greg. He must be." Well, I mean, what are they really gonna say in public to the media when they want to play in the team? That they're like, "Yeah." They're going to say that. But these players, some of them are coached by great coaches, really good coaches. Marco Silva at Fulham, if you spend time with him, is a brilliant tactician. Peter Bosz, PSV, is a fascinating human being who I hope we can get on the show soon so we can understand his tactical mindset and how he manages. You know, 3 of these players now, Dest, Tillman, and the great Ricardo Pepi. Greg almost has to show he has the tactical chops, right, to match them. I was quite... Yunus Musa said yesterday to Michel Giannone at Tuden, he said, the group loves Greg because Greg loves the group. He helps us off outside the field. That's the key. Greg's got to show he's more than just a nice guy to the players, right?
Absolutely. I saw something on Twitter that made me laugh, but kind of made me think. The great MLS Buzz on Twitter responded to something about that effect. Like, I had a science teacher who would let us watch movies all the time. You know, we didn't learn anything from. I loved him too. Like, that puts things in a perspective about where love is. What can you get out of that, right? I'm not saying that's Greg Berhalter. What I'm trying to say here is players are beholden to what works for them. Players are going to vouch for what works for them, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's the best thing for the program. I had this question, you know, Jeff Carlisle and some of the writers at ESPN, they did a story on is Greg Berhalter a good coach? And they asked me for my thoughts on this, and I started thinking about it. Yeah, I think Greg Berhalter is a good coach. I don't think he's the right coach for the U.S. men's national team, and those can be very different. Greg Berhalter is a guy that I think has done very, very well with the U.S. men's national team based on his capabilities. He's a guy that will present a plan to the powers that be, and that could be a PowerPoint, and make them understand where he wants to go. Can you now implement that plan and have your players understand it and translate it on the field? That's been hit or miss. That's been something where these great group of players that have played for the Peter Bosches of the world, that have played for the Thomas Tuchels, that have played for the Pep Guardiolas, that have played for the Stefano Piolis, that have played for the Julian Nagelsmann, maybe that's not there yet. It doesn't mean it can't get there, but it's been at a much slower rate. So it's one of those things where I understand that players love playing for him, but is this the best going forward?
So these are the 2 goals for Greg Berhalter. Number 1, avoid catastrophe. Number 2, prove Herculez Gomez wrong. So let's dive in to
which is not too hard.
Yeah, and avoid number 3. Did I say avoid catastrophe, guys? Number 4, No one freak out. Let's dive into a forensic accounting of this squad. And seeing as you're a striker, Herc, let's start at the top with the forwards. We suddenly have a bevy of almost too many options to choose from. And before we get to whom Greg selected, when you look at the options, big picture, following Balogun, the coveted one, who last May chose to ride with us, but was faltered, really fallen away at Monaco this season. I think 5 goals, 3 assists. this campaign. Josh Sargent, oh my lord, resurgent, 13 goals in 18 championship appearances this season for Norwich. Feels like an inevitable goal-scoring canary right now. Out, obviously, for this camp, as we'll discuss, with an injury at the weekend. But that reborn wonder, part man, part locomotive engine, El Tren, Ricardo Pepi, 7 goals in his last 10 United States games. Greg initially ignored the claims of Coventry in the Championships. Hadji Wright, who was then called up as Josh Sargent, got ankle knack. Also Brandon Vasquez, 5 goals, I think, in his first 10 games for Monterrey in Liga MX. He looks majestically potent. Jordan Pifok, who's quite decently Bundesliga it up with Gladbach. And World Cup choice Jesus Ferreira seems to have fallen out of the Berhalter picture finally. Big picture, and we'll get into who's there now and who's going to start in your mind, but big picture, how do you survey the options? How do you even rank? I mean, it's like apples and oranges, but how do you rank the depth chart, Herc? Give me a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
How do I rank it, or how does Greg Berhalter rank? Because those are two different things.
Herc, how do you rank it, baby?
Josh Sargent's my number 1. Unfortunately, he's not here due to injury, but he's been an absolute tear. You mentioned 13 goals in 18 games, 10 since the new year. No other player in this program is that hot. Josh Sargent also has equity with the U.S. men's national team. He was a starter at the World Cup. Josh Sargent's 22 years old? People forget how old he is. People look at this guy and they write him off, and he just keeps coming back and scoring goals, and now he's playing in his perfect position, which is a 9 position. When he started playing at the Premier League, he was playing as an outside midfielder, as a winger. And oftentimes in the championship, he was playing as a winger. And now it's his 9 position, and he's flourishing. He would be my number 1. If I go across the board of what he is good at, the talents that he has, he probably scores higher on all these certain attributes. He's easily the most talented 9 we have in this pool of players. Now, after after Josh Sargent, I would go Ricardo Pepi. And I know that's going to cause a stir. That's going to cause a stir. Ricardo Pepi, to no fault of his own, is being typecast as a guy that's going to help you off the bench, because that's where he's gotten the majority of his production, both club and country. Listen, the U.S. men's national team is not PSV. At PSV, he's got Luc de Jong, who's 34 years of age, who's a front runner for the most valuable player, the best player in the Eredivisie. He's one of the leading goal scorers, one of the leading assist facilitators in the Eredivisie. He's out of his mind. He's a team captain. He's not displacing him on the starting lineup, but when he gets into those games, he scores goals, important goals, Champions League game winners against Sevilla. Just this coming into this weekend, these string of games for the U.S. men's national team, he had I believe 97th minute game winner off a Malik Tillman assist. So he scores these goals, and for the U.S. men's national team, Ricardo Pepi's got 7 goals in his last 10 games. Mind you, all after his World Cup snub. The problem here is 5 of those have been as a sub, so you get typecast. Now Greg Berhalter says this is a guy I can count on off the bench. And then you have Folarin Balogun, who I think is a very, very good forward that is low on confidence right now and not in form. 5 goals in 21 league matches. He's played for the U.S. men's national team 8 times, 3 goals. Canada in last year's Nation League final, Oman, and Ghana. And never once have we said that is his breakout game. He has looked comfortable in Greg Berhalter's system.
You're saying he hasn't looked comfortable in Greg's system?
Correct. He's not looked comfortable in Greg Berhalter's system. We've seen him once. That was against Canada. BJ Callahan's system. We've not seen him look comfortable in Greg Berhalter's system. He scored against Oman, and he scored against Ghana. And he had, I believe in that Oman game, that situation at halftime where it looked like him and Greg Berhalter got into it a bit. He's not looked comfortable. And maybe that's not his fault. His style of running the line, of being a player that gets in behind, of exposing defenders in 1v1 situations with space ahead of him, being clinical, right foot, left foot, that type of thing, those aren't the opportunities he is getting. That's not the way that Greg Berhalter uses his 9. And then you have Hadji Wright, who I think is a fascinating addition here, Raj. This is a guy that is the last true 9 to score a goal in a World Cup since Brian McBride. the 2002 World Cup versus Mexico. That's how far you have to go back to find a true nine who has scored a goal in a World Cup. And it feels like the most disrespected player in this pool of players that's been called up is Haji Wright.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at Haji Wright, and you look at his art, you look at his season, you look at his last weekend. I mean, this 25-year-old gent from Los Angeles, very much, in many ways, became a scapegoat for the erratic selections down the stretch of the last World Cup cycle. When Greg dumped Ricardo Pepi, whose goals had honestly, you could make the case, had saved the cycle, had saved Greg's job. Haji suddenly pulled in at last on a team that just could not conjure goals at the World Cup. Not Haji's fault. He then went back to club football and has gone on to become the top scorer for his Premier League dreaming side, Coventry. 15 goals on the season. Didn't initially make this squad, and then last Saturday, what a day. I think a lot about Haji Wright Saturday. Scored a 90-plus 10-minute wonder goal to send his team to Wembley for an FA Cup semi-final. And then found out post-game. Spoke to Haji's agent. He told me, my God, Haji was going to warm weather climes to meet his family and have some sun. But then got a call right after the final whistle that he'd actually had to go to Heathrow Airport immediately to go and join the United States squad after all because of Josh Sargent's injury. And I just thought, what a remarkable mix of emotions Haji must have experienced on that afternoon as he sat there in the Heathrow lounge waiting to leave. What an incredible experience over the last 7 days, from not being selected to the goal, the reprieve. What do you see when you watch Haji Wright play?
And you have to add that he was playing as a left winger as well for Coventry. Out of position. 15 goals, 7 assists in all comps. I see the hottest 9 today on this roster. 7 goals, 1 assist since February, Raj. Since February. He's the hottest 9 right now. If you theoretically wanted to go with a hot hand, it would be Haji Wright. I feel for Haji because I go back to that World Cup cycle where he played, I think, a few games. And then ended up making the team. In those games, he actually comes off the bench, scores a goal and a penalty kick. And the only start he got leading up to that World Cup, was in a mud pit against El Salvador.
Oh, the mud classico.
It was the worst field conditions I've seen in quite some time. You could still find pictures of Yunus Musa covered in mud all over his white uniform. And the only player that I've seen in Greg Berhalter's regime get criticized publicly by Greg Berhalter was Haji Wright. And he spoke and said that Haji Wright didn't take advantage of the opportunity that he was given, and that's not nice when players don't take advantage of opportunities that coaches give them. It's not nice for the player, it's not nice for his teammates, it's not nice for the coach. And I go back and think, the only player that's ever been criticized publicly by Greg Berhalter is Haji Wright. Haji goes to the World Cup, and Haji, the stuff you would read from people where he's going because he's Christian Pulisic's friend, as if that's a reason to give a World Cup spot up. And then the only thing this guy does is the best performance that the U.S. men's national team had was against England, where they won in a draw. Okay? Where it's a 0-0 game. Who starts that game? Haji Wright. And we go about it like it doesn't exist.
So Haji is the hot hand. But who will Greg start? Quick hit. Who will Greg's front three be?
The front three, I've got no doubt it'll be Christian Pulisic on the left, Timothy Weah on the right, and Fowler and Balogun up top in the 9 position. And Fowler and Balogun in the eyes of many is still the number 1. And I think for Greg Berhalter, a player who he convinced, who was very much in the mix in the U23s for England, or the U21s at some point, he convinced him to switch programs. I think he's going to ride with them. He's going to give him another opportunity. I just don't know if against Jamaica that is the intelligent choice. A team that's going to be very pragmatic, sit, low block. You're going to need more creativity. You're going to need more players to do different things. I don't think those spaces will be afforded to a Fowler and Balogun. I would start Ricardo Pepi. Yes. I would start Ricardo Pepi right now. Yes. He's the hot hand. He's for the U.S. men's national team. He is the hot hand, and he's a player that proves to operate in tight spaces very well and can work off players very well. I think this game, you need to go with players who are going to be good at breaking down a low block.
God, I cannot agree with you more on both parts of your answer. I think Greg will start Ballo. I think Tim Weah, who has had real chemistry with Flo, who's really struggled to leave the bench at Juventus this season, Tim Weah, but has been great in a US shirt. And Christian, I honestly don't know what more Pepe has to do to get his chance, his shot, his start, his spotlight. Quick word on Pulisic. Gent is having a sizzling first Serie A season. Puli. Come on, baby. 20 goal contributions. Big goals too for second place Milan. God, it's so joyous watching him love his football again. Is a delight. His 33rd minute goal in the Europa League against Slavia Praha was his 100th goal contribution of his senior club career. All comps, he had his 101st at the weekend, when he became the first American playing for a team in the top 5 European leagues to score in 4 straight games, all comps, since 2010. Gent honestly has rekindled lockdown Pooley form. Hot take time, Herc. Is Christian Pulisic, in this ever more tactically complex world of modern football, is he the best US men's footballer this nation has ever produced? Is he now clear of the rest, including Clint Dempsey, Brian McBride, Yolandans?
In terms of talent, yes. It's one thing to say a player is talented. He's so talented, and that's why he is where he is today. But in terms of achievements, accomplishments, not yet. He may have the club accolades. He doesn't have the national team, and to no fault of his own. It's not his fault that the U.S. men's national team failed to get to the 2018 World Cup, and he couldn't prove how good of a player he was at a teenager at that stage, like Kylian Mbappe got to prove with France. No fault of his own, but other players like Clint Dempsey, Landon Donovan, they've done ridiculous things with the U.S. men's national team. Big moments with the U.S. men's national team. Landon still has the most assists in his international career. More than any other FIFA player. Neymar's chasing Landon Donovan. Neymar is chasing Landon Donovan. So there are players that for their national teams have done more thus far. But he's 25 years old. I've got no doubt in my mind Christian Pulisic stays healthy. He's shattering. He's shattering records. He will be recognized as the best American player of all time.
God, Neymar chasing Landon Donovan is some mental picture. I'm not going to lie. But I'll just say all that last 60 seconds of hot take from you was just Kyle Beckerman erasure, and I won't stand for it on this podcast. To the midfield, and it is so unbelievably good to see my friend Tyler Adams back on the field after grueling double hamstring surgery. I think he's played just 20 minutes in the Premier League in the last year. Came on for Bournemouth last week. It was quite emotional watching him, to be honest. But he's had so few minutes in his tank as he returns from an agony of exile. Are you like, what the hell is he being called up for? This man is clearly not match fit. Should be, just training at Bournemouth to become fitter. This is a risk for a player coming back like this. Or do you see his call up really about the chemistry and leadership for an international team, which is really all about chemistry? And if you speak to anybody on that team, Tyler's the ultimate glue guy. The squad without him, the leaders. Tim Ream is the father of this group. And when you speak to the other players, they're like, there's a rule you can't get up from dinner until everyone's finished. And essentially, everyone just looks, every dinner just looks over to Tim Ream for his nod, to tell them when they can get up. And Tyler is that man alongside Tim Ream that they need so badly. How do you think about it?
It's nuts to think about who Tyler Adams is, right? It goes beyond the playing field. Last World Cup, 2022 World Cup, he was the youngest captain in the World Cup. The youngest captain. You think about the positions he's been put in and how he's handled them. I still recall the Iran presser where he mispronounces Iran and says Iran, and they correct him, and he just handles it so well. And the composure about him, like everything off the field screams leadership. You need to have people around like that. I've got zero issue with Tyler Adams being called. even if it's Greg Berhalter and the staff wanting to see where he's at, wanting to integrate him back into this national team, because people forget it's been a year since Tyler Adams played for Bournemouth. It's been since the 2022 World Cup since he's appeared or been with the U.S. men's national team. Over 2 years. It's going on 2 years there. So it's important to get people like Tyler back into the system, so his presence is not only felt, but Tyler feels like he is back. I don't expect Tyler to play much in these games. Certainly not start.
Tyler yesterday told the press he can, quote, contribute 45 to 60 minutes. Does he play? Yeah. Yes or no?
Yeah. He plays. I don't think he starts. Now, you have to be very careful as a player, ex-player. I can tell you, you need people to save you from yourself. The player will always want to play. You need to manage his minutes. You need to see where he is at. The last thing you want is for him to overdo it and get back to where he was back on the shelf. So you manage those minutes, and he will play a role. I just don't think it's a starting role, which is not the worst thing against a team like Jamaica, who, like I said, I think will sit in and will be very pragmatic, and you need a different type of approach to unlock them.
We have to mention 2 words, Gio Reyna. Another gent who's not played much football, but for very different reasons, unfortunately, to Tyler Adams. Just 39 minutes across 5 games for Gio for Nottingham Forest since he arrived in the Premier League in the January transfer window. I think his largest cameo was a 17-minute substitute appearance. Gent has gone essentially from a bench player for Champions League Dortmund to bench player for Probs. Let's be honest, soon to be Championship Nottingham Forest. A hard place to be at the moment. A hard moment for him individually, very hard moment in that locker room, and it's been hard to watch. He is still so very young, 21 years of age. Hard not to see his spiraling trajectory since the chaos in the wake of that World Cup with Greg. You look at who he's competing with for playing time here. Malik Tillman has been playing regularly for league-leading PSV Eindhoven. Yunus Musa has dazzled in his opportunities at times for second in Italy AC Milan. I look at it like this US team has so often been a happy place for players struggling in Europe with their clubs. See Pulisic in that Chelsea era, Weston McKennie at Leeds, Josie Altidore at Sunderland in years past. Can it be that for Gio?
I believe so, and there's a silver lining here for U.S. men's national team fans. Go back to Christian Pulisic with Thomas Tuchel, when he wasn't being used, when he wasn't even being accounted for, where he was an afterthought. He would use the U.S. men's national team as a refresher, and he would come to the U.S. men's national team, he would be refreshed, he would be happy, there's joy in his game, and he would produce on the field. We've seen that from Giovanni Reyna before. In the lead up to last Nations League, he wasn't playing regularly with Dortmund. He comes against Mexico and he was brilliant. He gives Fowler and Balogun a great assist in the final versus, Canada. It's a different type of football, and you can use that as a refresher. I think that's what Gio's looking forward to here, and I think that's what Greg Berhalter is looking forward with Giovanni Reyna. I think people see the ceiling in Giovanni Reyna, and that ceiling will give him equity with Greg Berhalter to get an opportunity to be in that midfield. Listen, I see a situation for Giovanni Reyna where it's Yunus Musa, who's not been playing that much with AC Milan, but like as you said, when he comes on the field, he does very well. And Weston McKennie, who has been lights out for Juventus. Like a different side of Weston McKennie. He's adding assists to his game. There's a silkiness and confidence to his game in the final third now, a little bit of a swagger against a low block, a pragmatic team like Jamaica, who, when they played against Canada in Canada, to qualify for this game right now, the semifinal, Canada had a ton of opportunities because of how deep they sat, because of how they were structured. It wasn't until the second half where the Jamaican national team inserted Damian Lowe, who's a center back, into that midfield, and they got a little bit more bite and created turnovers, that the game changed for them. But if they invite you in If they open that door for you, you have Giovanni Reyna, Yunus Musa, Weston McKennie, creative enough players to unlock a defense like that, they're going to feast.
By the way, in that regard, it was emotionally really lovely to see Brendan Aronson get a recall. Gent did not initially make the squad after a barren season at Union Berlin. Suddenly, belatedly found his scoring boots over the past 2 weeks. He's been honest about his struggles. I think he called this the hardest year of his life. And when Luca De La Torre was injured at the weekend, Brendan was recalled as an alternate. Again, this US squad, a place of solace. That's what it has been. That's what it can be for our young talents during time of struggle. By the way, leaving him out initially showed that Greg is making it clear this is now not the case. I have a feeling Brendan really needs this. So Godspeed to him. To the back line, Serginho Dest called up despite being suspended for the semi-final after that epic meltdown against Trinidad and Tobago. Joe Scally likely to start in his stead, much like he did in last year's final against Canada when Dest was, checks notes, also suspended for getting a red card. Can we just shine a spotlight for a moment on Anthony Bloody Robinson, the greatest Scouser American of all time, and that includes Trent Alexander-Arnold. I think I'm 967th on that list at the last count. Anthony Robinson's stunning poem of a pass to set up Rodrigo Muniz's goal against Spurs on Saturday. That was his 6th Premier League assist of the season, most by a defender in the entire league, most ever in a season by an American all time, tied with Clint Dempsey with 10 games still to play. Herc, we've got to recognise this gent is playing football on another level right now.
Ridiculous. And it's not just the statistics where he's flourishing. We talk about what we already knew about him. He was a powerful player going forward. The way he drove the ball, he's a force. Athletically, it was very difficult to get by him on both sides. Offensively, defensively, he was a terror. He's been productive for the U.S. men's national team. But that final ball was missing. I always thought that technically in the final third, he was still lacking. Well, that's not been the case at the highest of levels in the Premier League. So much so that Pep Guardiola has even spoken about the player and how good of a player he is and how attracted he is to players like Anthony Robinson. And he doesn't forget who he is. He's a defender. We talk about statistics. He's up there with, anticipation, turnovers, and what he causes. And anytime you look at the statistics for Fulham, he's up there in the highest of statistics offensively, in the highest of touches every single game for Fulham. He's the guy who touches the ball the most, and defensively, he doesn't forget who he is, and he's turning it on at the right time.
By the way, when we look at the defensive unit, Miles Robinson, one of just 2 players chosen for the national team from Major League Soccer, only outfield player. The other was Inter Miami's goalkeeper Drake Callender. You got to wonder whether Miles Robinson would have his place if Cameron Carter-Vickers was fully fit, or Sheffield United's Premier League starter Austin Trusty was given a chance. Are we at a place right now where there could very soon be 0 MLS outfield players in the US squad? What would that say to you about where the league is right now? I can remember before the 2018 World Cup where MLS way overpaid wage-wise to bring Clint Dempsey, Michael Bradley, Josie Altidore back from very, very, very solid Roma for Michael Bradley. Josie coming back from Sunderland to return to MLS, so they had the cream of the US squad playing here week in, week out.
Easy money says yes, because the best players in the world play in Europe, and at the rate this U.S. men's national team is going, their players for the U.S. men's national team are playing in Europe. The majority of the pool is in Europe. And Miles Robinson is maybe an interesting outlier because he had European offers on the table. We spoke to him, on the Vamos podcast, and he was adamant that his goal is still to get to Europe. So he's an outlier on that list. We're getting to the point where the majority of players in this pool, if you want to compete for the U.S. men's national team at any position, you might have to be in Europe. I think that's a given. Anytime we have a guest here and they're on the fringe for the U.S. men's national team and we have them on Vamos, I ask them, do you have to compete in Europe to compete in this pool? And they all say yes. That's the trend. Now, that doesn't mean that Major League Soccer is not a good league, But you look at Argentina, the World Cup champions, they don't want their players playing in Argentina. And they're the World Cup champions. They don't want their players playing in the domestic league. They want them playing the best leagues in the world. The Premier League, the La Ligas, the Serie A's, the Bundesligas, the French League, etc., etc. They want those players playing there, not domestically.
Just makes us a normal footballing nation. Talking about normal footballing nations, let's take a moment to talk about the opposition on Thursday. Jamaica, currently 57th in the FIFA rankings, just below Paraguay. I think they've beaten the United States twice in their history on American soil. But they are a team on the up under my friend, Coach Heimir Hallgrímsson, the Icelandic dentist who led Tiny Iceland to the 2018 FIFA World Cup. This is a squad, yes, undermined by key injuries. Ethan Pinnock of Brentford out at the back, suspensions to forward Shamar Nicholson, an ex-Everton icon, one of my favourites, Damari Gray. But they will have Fulham midfielder Bobby de Cordova-Reid. I think 5 goals for him in 24 league games. He pretty well scores every time he plays against Everton. And West Ham United forward Mikel Antonio, who just found the net again for West Ham at the weekend for the first time since December. But oof, what a potent gentleman he is. Tell us in your mind, Hurt, what the United States are poised for. Because I look at this team as one that could hurt opponents who underestimate them on the counter.
Yeah, Raj. And the one you didn't mention, who, in my opinion, if I did a power rankings of CONCACAF right now, would be the hottest player in CONCACAF, is Leon Bailey. He's been ridiculous for Aston Villa, for Unai Emery. Double-digit goals and double-digit assists in all comps at the highest of levels. The Premier League is the highest level you can play at domestically. Well, this guy right now is balling out. He's not going to be here for disciplinary reasons. And what I mean by that is the Jamaican Federation is punishing him for missing curfew, which I applaud. But what an absence this is for Jamaica. So they're a team right now that's got a ton of absences and could still hurt you because of who they are going forward. They're so Jekyll and Hyde. I could sit here and tell you like they're capable of scoring 1-2 goals on the U.S. men's national team, but I could also, in that same breath, say I can easily see the U.S. men's national team scoring 4 on them.
I interviewed Heimir Hallgrímsson for a show which will drop tomorrow, Thursday, game day. It was really fascinating speaking to him. An Icelander, a UEFA-based coach coming to our region, CONCACAF, with fresh eyes. And it was really the story of a football programme that can occasionally be its own biggest opponent. The Jamaican Federation, the structure, the systems, or the lack of them that they have in place compared to Europe to develop the deep well of raw skill that they have in that nation. Heimir was essentially like, we have so many street footballers, but we don't have the infrastructure, we don't have a plan, we don't have the coaching to really turn them into fulfilling their potential. That's before we even get to the rich wonder that is the Jamaican diaspora that they are tapping into ever more, but without the scouting system that the United States truly have to really try and attract dual nationals. There is another semi-final. Mexico are playing Panama. Herc, give us a top line blast on that magical game.
Whoa, this is ridiculously difficult to predict. On one end, you have the team who best works in CONCACAF, the best structured team, which is Thomas Christensen's Panama. If you look at the talent level they have and what they get out of it, that is the best work team in CONCACAF. Panama are different. Since Jimmy Lozano, the coach of the Mexican national team, took over, if we use that as a baseline between the two teams, the only team that Thomas Christensen has lost to is the Mexican national team. And that's in the Gold Cup final. That was a last-minute Santiago Jimenez goal off the bench in a game that Panama could have easily won in front of 75,000 Mexican fans in SoFi Stadium. I was there. The tides could have easily turned. To predict this game is incredibly difficult. The last 2 outings between Panama and Mexico have gone 1-0 in favor of Mexico. The third place game, Diego Coca's last stand in Las Vegas, in Nations League third place game. They beat Panama 1-0. Early goal, I believe, is the first 3 minutes of the game. And then the game I just mentioned, late goal. Jimmy Lozano is in a difficult position because if Jimmy Lozano does not beat Panama, I cannot sit here and guarantee you he will be the coach of the Mexican national team come Copa America. And people will say, you're crazy. How can that be? He just took over. Victor Manuel Vucetich lasted 2 games with the Mexican national team. Diego Coca, the last coach of the Mexican national team right before Jimmy Lozano, lasted 4 games. Both those coaches lost 1 game. So I don't see a scenario where they lose to Panama, don't make the final, and Jimmy Lozano is safe come Copa America. It's that big of a game for the Mexican national team.
So pretty well, the motto for the entire semi-final onwards of the Nations League is avoid catastrophe, both in English and in Spanish. But it's spoiler alert time, Herc. Put us out of our misery. I need a score prediction for Thursday night. And whom will we be playing in Sunday night's final, please God?
Yes, the U.S. men's national team will take advantage of the absences from a Jamaican squad and just they're more talented on paper individually and collectively have been there as well. I think they'll win this game 3-1. I think it'll be rigid and difficult at first, but as soon as that first one goes in, you will unlock the Jamaican defense, and they will try to play catch up. And in transition, you can pick them apart with players like Pulisic and Timothy Weah. And keep an eye out for whichever 9 comes off the bench. I think gets one, whether that's Ricardo Pepi or Haji Wright.
Playing who in the final?
They will play against Mexico. I see another 1-0 win in Mexico's future. Listen, the one thing to keep in mind here is they're playing in Arlington, Texas, which may be a house of horrors for Mexico for certain players leading up to World Cups, but the support will be ridiculous. They will put in over 60, 70, maybe 80,000 Mexican fans in that stadium, and I think they'll push them over the line against a Panamanian squad that ultimately may just lose out based on individual talent.
By the way, I actually agree with you that the American game will be 3-1, but I think it'll be the kind of 3-1 we do, which is one of those which is closer than we'd wish. 1-1 for the longest time. Enter Pepe, 2 late goals that make that glorious 3-1 sound so much more impressive than it was to actually experience. But bring on Mexico Sunday night for some CONCACAF feasting. Herc, before we go, one more order of business. Last month, we were watching the US women in Gold Cup play. I think they were playing with 3,000 fans at that first game at the Dominican Republic. It was hard to see. You were at the next game. We chatted afterwards. You talked about how low just the energy was around it. So, all of us who long for a day when the US men's national team can fulfill our forever dreams and fulfill their potential to become a footballing force. We've talked about this a lot on the pod, that one of the elements missing, we got the players now, we got the experience now. The coaching is a work in progress, but we want to take the field, believe we're better than whoever we're playing. And watching the African Nations Cup and the Asian Cup, you see your Cameroons, the indomitable Lions, you see your Thailand, the war elephants, and also my new favourite nickname, which I love so much, Jordan Al-Nashama, the chivalrous gentleman. What a great nickname. And we realised, Herc, we need a great nickname for this US men's team ahead of the Copa. We asked our listeners, our GFOPs, to come up with one that could eclipse those of the past. The Stars and Stripes in the 50s, the Yanks in the 80s and early 90s, 2014's Von Traps under Klinsmann, your baby Eagles of 2022. These players aren't babies anymore. We got, Herc, just under 1,000 suggestions. Oh. Are you ready for the top 5?
Let's hear them.
Here we go. First, Jeffrey Varner coming up with the old classic, the American Revolution. This one I love from Bob V. She thinks that the nickname for the US men's national team, Bob, can you be a bit more optimistic? She thinks it should be this generation's fast car. That doesn't exactly inspire confidence, Herco. No. We got a couple of lovely ones. Jen Ziegels. I see what you're doing there, Cameron McMurty, and I like it. And then, I'm not trying to put a thumb on the scale, but I do love FC to Shining Sea, which makes me feel so...
Oh, that's a good
Do you
play.
like that? Sean Parker, you clever... I wonder if it's that Sean Parker. That is a beautiful, beautiful piece of work. We had from multiple people that you don't know where I'm from, dogs. which I've got a feeling may stick. Here's what we're going to do. GFOPs, you get to vote. You get to help us pick out the winner. Voting's easy. Just look for the link on our social media everywhere. Click that link and add your voice to this incredibly important national task, arguably as important as putting a man on the moon. I don't know if you've got a favourite from those, Herco.
I like the FC to Shining Sea. I will ask people to do one thing.
Yeah.
Reach out to Weston McKennie. Ask Weston McKennie what the nickname should be, because if anybody has a sharp brain to come up with these things, it's Weston McKennie, and I will go with whatever Weston McKennie wants them to be called.
God bless. Who wants democracy? Well, we can just ask Weston McKennie. By the way, I'd love to know. I would love to know what comes out of Weston. I mean, there's the right brain, there's the left brain, and there's the Western brain, and they're all so wonderfully different, and we need them all. We are going to put this to a vote. The winner will be the one, I have no doubt, with which will ride to World Cup glory in 2026. Herc, I've got to say, I have loved listening to you on Vamos. It's been one of the joys of my year. Just remind us who you got coming up over the next couple of weeks as you guess.
Yeah, we have Luca De La Torre coming up, who unfortunately won't be with the U.S. men's national team, but it was great talking to him about his upbringing in San Diego, California, and what life is like now in Spain for a guy who didn't grow up knowing Spanish, practicing Spanish, who is now doing interviews in Spanish, and it's a Luca like you've never seen before. And I mentioned it to him. He doesn't show us the world who Luca is. He did in this interview, and it was a lot of fun.
Can I just say, you're Jesus Ferreira. You know, I said that he's out of the picture, but listen to that interview, dear listeners, and again, see a different side of the man. And to you, dear listener, we have a ton of US men's national team content to come, all of it presented by Michelob Ultra, superior light beer. Tomorrow, we got that pod special with Jamaica manager Heimir Halmgren. That's right, my mate, the former dentist who rose to become the manager of Iceland, led them on their fairy tale Euro run, World Cup run. He's now the head reggae boy in charge. That's, I'm sure, not his official title, but it should be. We sat down with him and he talked about his team, his philosophy, his game, his experience of CONCACAF, also what he thinks of this United States team and Christian Pulisic in particular. Then tomorrow night, after the match, it's a very special Do It Live, right at the final whistle. Come and be with us, debrief on everything that you see, that you feel, that we share together. Subscribe to YouTube Live for that. Come and be with us. Come and ask your questions. Make your statements after, please God, that win. Friday, as the smoke clears, we are going to break it all down. Look ahead to Sunday's game. Whether it's, please, dear God, the final or the third place. We'll break it all down with Mr. Jesse Marsh. I cannot wait to get his take. And then, please God, for the final, a massive guest on Sunday night to savour that with. Until then, dear GFOPs, enjoy your football. Enjoy this experience of watching the US men's national team. Herc, thank you, you beautiful human being.
Raj, thank you. Always a pleasure, my man.
Oh, vamos, courage, and go, go USA.